Welcome to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast. And my guest today is Peter Kelly, a truth seeker based in Waterford, Ireland, a poet, writer, teacher, and guide. Peter is an explorer of the untouched regions of the subconscious mind and writes about his journey from darkness into light in his new poetry book, The Phoenix Birth. The book, which is a compilation of 24 poems of his own realization and self-healing process. Peter, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate you for having us on anyway.
I'm delighted. And as we were chatting beforehand, I was saying to Peter, I'm quite curious, about people's own journey of healing and that self-realization. And, because we're all different. And we spoke about that even a few minutes ago. And we all do things differently. We think differently. We react differently, So for me, I love getting a new perspective and learning a little bit more so that I can help myself, because we're always developing personally. We're always learning that there is something new. It's not just we know it and that's it. And I even learn from my own clients and my own students. And then whatever I learn, I share with them. So we're always sharing and passing on the knowledge and the wisdom from, if it's only learned 5 minutes ago or 5,000 years ago. So in your own journey, Peter, and we'll come back to your book, but in your own journey going back, who was a very young Peter Kelly?
Jesus, there's a good question. A very young Peter Kelly was a very, very confused, I would say. Very confused, felt very different. A lot of interests that I had were a lot to do with like ancient cultures, and I always had a big draw there to something that I always felt there was more information there, more knowledge and wisdom there than what we were actually ever being told, or that we ever kind of realized or could see. So I was kind of drawn to a lot of topics, even like the likes of alchemy. At a very young age, even at 10 or 11, I was studying alchemy, a lot of occult kind of studies. So I was drawn to a lot of that kind of stuff, say at a very young age, which obviously can make you feel pretty strange, pretty weird. And then obviously not understanding about yourself, or, you're trying to fit in. You're always trying to fit in. You're trying to conform to what everybody else is doing. And I suppose I tried that for a good few years while I was my younger years. And what I found is it was just pulling me apart. And obviously there's not a lot of information at the time. Not everybody had, access to the internet. So you're very limited to what's around you as to what you know of society and of what life really is. So I just felt I was just a very strange, weird kind of a child, I suppose. But it created a lot of chaos, I suppose, within me, and that getting pulled apart and what have you. My father would have left when I was very young as well, so that would have been absent from a young age, and in a kind of a masculine role as well. And what happened, I suppose, is I kind of went towards drug and alcohol addiction. And again, that was, looking back now, I have a better understanding of analyzing myself as to why so many reasons. And out of a number of reasons, I suppose, one is the fact of just to fit in, and to feel more comfortable in myself. I was able to block a lot of, through alcohol and drugs, I was able to block a lot of that turmoil that I was feeling internally. And those other aspects as well. I mean, obviously looking for a masculine role as well. There's something there to do with going into that world as well, and just kind of coming across a lot of kind of clash with authority, I suppose, and the likes of that. But that's more or less the kind of younger years, going into the teenage years, which I kind of battled with drug and alcohol addiction for most of my teens into my early to mid 20s. And then that obviously combined with a lot of depression, a lot of darkness, and just a lack of understanding, really, trying to fit in and trying to understand who I was, or what this really deep, dark internal chaos, what it was and why it was.
When you say it all together, and I say this about my own story as well. We talk about it like, that's just the way it was and it happened and now it's grand, but it was many years of chaos and turmoil and emotions and reactions and all of those things that a lot of people involved. But we go back to, the conforming as young people. And again, it's what we're taught, isn't it? Whether it's our family circles, our schools, our community, depending on where we're living, what their beliefs are and what their patterns are, and we're learning and falling into place, basically. But for you, you felt that different, and I love to hear that, because I think we all feel different at some stages in our life, but we either get curious about it and we rebel, what people, adults would say, they're rebelling against authority and rebelling against my rules, or other people say they're very unique. It depends on the family or who, again, is your role model or your influencer at that time. Was there one person in your life, Peter, with all the chaos, with your dad leaving, all of that, was there one person that stands out for you that even through all of that, even if they didn't have the same understandings or all the answers for your questions, but was there one person that was a very positive influence in you, that there was one person you always knew was there for you?
Well, I mean, my mother put up with a hell of a lot, to be honest. I mean, it's always going to come into. My mother was, I mean, a fantastic woman for what she stood by, for what she could as well, and still is, but, she obviously got driven to the point with my chaos, and I had so much trouble with the law as well. I mean, I ended up in prison as well a couple of times through it all, but like, as much as she could, she stood by, you know what I mean, very, very, give me as much support as she could, but in a world that she basically had absolutely no understanding of as well, which, looking back, obviously I look at her perspective of things now as well to understand, and obviously being a parent myself now as well, how difficult that must be to try stand by somebody in a world that you absolutely have no idea about, and have no sense to, and try to support somebody as they go through something while they're in a complete self-destruct mode for probably so many years as well. So, I mean, my mother has to be mentioned there, and that, like, 100%. But I mean, that's probably the main, that it would have to be.
Yeah. But it's lovely to hear that as well, because, and again, as I said, we're going to go into your poetry as well, but the divine feminine, I feel, is very strong within your work. And for me, that a lot of it comes from, our maternal influence, I suppose, in our lives. They mightn't be the perfect parents, or they mightn't have known what to do, but there was that connection. There was a sense of force and power and love that was beyond their understanding and beyond your understanding, even as a child, and I think that's why, people look at children and their moms and they go, that bond will never be broken, because for me, it's eternal. It's something that was created long before the physical bond. It's something that is there beyond this physical world.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mention that, actually, just because my grandmother as well, who actually only just recently passed, would have been another as well, who was like always kind of there as well, which is my mother's mother.
Yeah.
So again, like, she would have been another really, really fantastically strong feminine role as well, that it was around. So definitely, as you mentioned, like, there has always been a very strong feminine role that I kind of grew up under, and to learn a lot about the, that respectful side of things as well. And even within my chaos, I was still fairly good with my respect towards most people, and the lines and the boundaries. Even some people kind of find it hard to realize or understand that the fact that you can go so far across the line against, we say, legalities and things like that. And what's looked down as, especially in the drug culture and like selling drugs, which I did end up doing. And to see how can you have respect in that, like, and like, you had your own morals and you had my own rules in what I was doing with things, as much as it was wrong or it's the law or what have you. And again, most of that probably does come back from that feminine influence as well. And again, as you mentioned, the divine feminine, which is, it's a big part of my own work, is the balance of divinity amongst every individual, which is masculine and feminine, which is in everybody, whether you're male or female.
Yeah. So that, and I love that. I was only teaching yesterday, and I was talking about the balance, and I said we're finding the balance constantly in our lives. So for you, with your father leaving at a very young age, you were already set up for a fall, and people say that, well, that's only stereotyping. It's not, because we need that balance within our lives. And I know many women and many men that are single parents, and they're always trying to find that balance, to be the masculine and the feminine energy within that parenting role. So you sought it in other ways, and again, like that, outside of your family environment, was there a masculine role that you found that it was security in a way, even if it wasn't right for you, but it felt like security?
And that's another good point as well, because you're tapping into a lot of the analysis I've done on myself over the years, and like, And it's funny because looking back now, I know subconsciously I was looking for some masculine fill. And like, I mean, and there probably was a few. I mean, there was like, I got into music, and I learned to play music when I was probably an early teenager as well. And there was a friend I used to play music with, and his father actually was very good at giving us a space to kind of, obviously he saw what was going on with a lot of us, and he tried to create a space for us with music that could maybe keep us away from that other side that I went, we'll say, deeper into, and the legality side of things, and fall into that deeper into the chaos. So I mean, there was a couple of, I suppose, masculine roles around me, and again, it's very hard to know what you're looking for or what you're aligning with when you don't know what it is, internally yourself. And again, it is a subconscious reach that we do, even though we don't realize it, and even the whole thing with the authority, and a lot of the work I've done on myself, especially with the deeper realizations I've had with some experiences with plant medicines, I've really understood that the whole thing about authority is actually a masculine as well. And that clash with authority is actually my search for masculine as well, which had been over the years as well. So it's kind of come up in different ways. So not even just so much as an actual individual male person, but it has come up in male or masculine attributed energies, we'll say, in the world as well.
Yeah. How did you want that physically? Yeah. How did you want it to manifest as a young person? Now as the adult looking back, what was that physical need or emotional need from that masculine energy? Do you ever consider that, or?
Yeah, and it's a tough one to really kind of mark down, because at the time, because it is a subconscious action, you're not really consciously aware. But looking back, I think it was more survival, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the friends I hung around with, we all had kind of like somewhat of a similar story. There was some kind of a similar thing, maybe, especially with a lack of father. And I think there's something about survival, about, again, because masculinity being so toxic because of how it's shown in the world, especially was it at that time anyway. I'm sure it still is. For growing up, it's all about that ego, and it's all about the strong, but it's the strong in the wrong way. It's not in a balanced way. It's in a very, it's a forceful kind of a way. So I think the survival thing comes into that, is the fact of thinking that you have to be able to hold yourself. You have to be able to stand up for yourself, defend yourself. And that was the kind of side, I think, that I was, now looking back, that I was subconsciously looking for, was for me to survive in life, was I needed to have these attributes to be that form of strong, which isn't really a strength. It's a completely out of balance masculinity, which I obviously understand now. But I think that's what it was for me reaching out, is just that survival mode, is some kind of a masculine strength to actually be able to survive life.
Yeah. And it also feels kind of, when you're speaking and even in your energy, is that you kind of almost wanted somebody there to protect you also as well, that there was, that protector, that kind of warrior energy, and that can be the female, so strong. But for you, it almost feels like it was somebody to shield you as a young man that you didn't have. Can you hear me, Peter?
Yeah, it's kind of, it's hard to pinpoint exactly, because it is completely, yeah. So it's, because it's a subconscious kind of a call, that it's hard to kind of say really exactly what it was. But I mean, I suppose, deep down it definitely was that, because you're lacking that guidance, that aspect of guidance, the masculine guidance, which comes into a lot of things, and especially as you come up into a teenager and adolescence, when males really, well, I suppose females as well, but I can only speak from my own side, is it get tested, like, it's that, stand up for yourself, like you're going to come across that, like, and if you've never had that, like, your entire life, like, you've never had anyone to guide you in that way. So I suppose you are looking for some kind of a protector in that aspect, or somebody who can guide you in that way, to teach you how are you supposed to be, or how are you supposed to navigate these situations in life. And whatever happens, we'll say, like, through school, or just through just going outside your door, and whatever goes on where you're from. And so definitely, definitely would be.
Very interesting. So you went into the chaos of drugs and alcohol. And again, it was nearly like you created this little tribe for yourself. You had your family tribe, but you needed a tribe outside of it. It was kind of identifying who you are, creating yourself without realizing, what you were creating. but from the chaos and running into more chaos. But in that whole experience, because I always say no experience is ever wasted, Peter, and that we learn the most usually from the chaos, usually from the survival mode. And you look at yourself now. I always say only look back to see how far you've actually come. And sometimes you look back and you kind of wave off the worst times of your life. And I say never wave it off, because it has been part of the foundation or the building or the creation of who you are now. So we honor all parts of that, all parts of the chaos, because it was part of the flames that ignited that passion inside of us to become who we are and who we want to be and who we truly are. And that it's like this realization all of a sudden is going, why did it take me so long? Or why did I have to go through this shit?
Couldn't have got that sooner.
So if you go back to that, tribe that you were in and the chaos, what were the best things about it?
The best things from my perspective now.
Yeah.
Because it's a very different perspective.
Yeah.
No, and absolutely, as you said, there is exactly what I've come to. I think in the last maybe 8 months in particular, one of the biggest realizations, and yourself, when we talk about realizations, we're talking about understanding. It's not just understanding something, but it's actually really internally feeling it and living it. And one of the biggest things I've had in my process in the last 8 months is just coming to that understanding that absolutely everything is perfect. Everything that happens is absolutely perfect. Everything is there for us to get the lesson or to steer us, and that pattern will keep happening until we get the lesson. So for me, where I'm at now is looking back. I mean, without all the experiences that I had, and prison being one of the main ones, prison has been one of my best experiences. Now looking back, because the way my mind works and the way I think and the way I analyze, and I have a very overactive mind a lot of the time, which doesn't suit me, but it does actually work very well for other aspects. But I analyze people very well. I can sit back and watch, and I can read people very, very, very deeply. And all these experiences have gotten me such a deep understanding of the psychological workings of people. And especially in situations, and especially how situations can develop or can kick off. And again, coming from the addiction side of things, and the alcohol and the drugs, and just in social situations as well. So it's something that's given me, the main thing that all that chaos has really given me such a deep inner and understanding of that whole process of how the mind gets deeper into that chaos, and what can make it worse, what can, what all those situations are, what can happen with people. It's just, and then understanding it from my own journey as well, and then different times, and because I analyze so much as well, I've always watched my own thoughts as they change, which has been absolutely a struggle in itself over my own life, but now actually seeing it and being able to use it to my advantage, and I've been able to use it with myself and to give it back to other people as well. So I mean, that's probably been the greatest thing from the chaos, is just that really deep understanding of how the mind works, and how the mind can change, and how the mind can convince the self, that it's right, when it's actually just the mind keeping us in the chaos. And being able to understand how those cogs move and how they work and how they actually come into place, and catching them, and then being able to obviously turn them around, especially for myself in my own journey, being able to actually describe that and break it down in a very simple, logical form to other people now who are facing something similar, and for them to be able to kind of really grab hold of that from what I'm saying. And again, for me, not just somebody who's read a book, but somebody who's actually lived it as well, and can give that back.
Yeah, very good, Peter. Yeah, I definitely think so, because again, why I'm intrigued by people is their experiences. I didn't know your background when I asked you to be my guest on the podcast, and you were very open and emailed me, and there was no judgment or shocking or anything. Nothing, I should say, shocks me. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing anymore, Peter, but it's because it's because it's not the labels that I identify with people anymore. It's usually energetic. Usually for me, there's some connection that somewhere I trust that connection. I'm really strong now with people before I get to know them even. There's something inside of me. I trust my intuitive side so much, because for me, it helped me survive. growing up and to the woman I am today. I didn't always listen to it because the mind did take over and brought me more into the chaos. But again, I've learned so much from that, and here I am now. But for you, even when you talk about, what we're looking for and that chaos and everything, you're really searching for that connection to self. You're searching for a connection to another human being, to connect on that spiritual level. And I don't think we realize that, obviously, growing up. People talk about in religious forms a connection to God, and that's the only connection they're taught of. I remember years ago going into a school and doing positive mental health, and I spoke about the relationship with yourself, and they all burst out laughing, Peter, and said, "Oh yeah, I'm gay, I love myself," and that's what they believed, a relationship with yourself was. And I was quite shocked, and I thought, God, 17-year-olds really don't get it. So I suppose, sorry, Peter, go on.
You're saying it's that whole detachment, though, isn't it? Like, it's not taught. It's not taught to be, as you said, like, attached to yourself, or to recognize yourself even.
But maybe we're not supposed to growing up. The more I work with children a lot of the time, and they are quite detached from everything, really, because it is just, they're very self-absorbed, and a lot of the younger ones live in the moment. The teenagers are just about themselves. I think that's part of them growing up. They're supposed to pull away from their parents, and they're supposed to rebel and push out the boundaries. Now they've become so anxious, though, because they're told, that they should be. We were told as well, but we didn't have internet, or we didn't have many books to read, so we didn't have as much information. I think there's too much out there. For me, it's like I didn't know about the outside world. I only knew about the world I was living in, and that was bad enough. If I knew about the outside world, I think I definitely would have been gone a long time ago, because it seemed really bad out there. So I think maybe now, even now, sitting here with you and hearing you speak, to me, it's still about connection. It's about, and even with you saying your dad, not being around and having that strong force of the feminine with your mom, but you're still looking for a connection within the masculine role, bringing in the balance. And even now, you're trying to find a connection within yourself to connect with other people. We're always constantly trying to connect, Peter.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I suppose for me, with the like, I've gone back to label myself, because people started asking me so much, what is it that you do, or what is it you do? And it's so hard for me, because I can say I'm a poet, I could say I'm esotericist, occultist, symbolist, I study symbols, I can say so many different things, and none of them really say what it is I do, and so that's why I went with truth seeker, because that's what I've really been searching for all my life. That's why I was searching the ancient cultures. It's why I was searching everything. But that truth seeker, for me, the more I've gone into it, like, and again, I do talks about what is truth, and it's not like, because most people's perspective of truth is, okay, it's, you say something, it's either true or it's a lie, or what, and it scratches the surface. But when we really start to look at truth, none of us see truth. None of us actually see truth on this level, because we're mortal, we're dualistic. And as you go deeper and deeper, for me, truth is a perception for me of God, because God is not dualistic. Well, we don't know. It's just there's a philosophy that maybe, for me, with that connection that I'm really looking for, is I'm looking for that connection back to the divine source. And that's just, since you mentioned the connections, and what I'm finding is, by going back and cultivating that connection, that's where I'm getting my balance. And getting the balance of understanding masculinity, of understanding femininity, of understanding the strength in a divine masculinity in myself, because the masculine has healthy traits, like in that strength, in that support, in that protection, and then obviously cultivating my divine feminine side, which is obviously my intuition, my nurturing, my compassion, and bringing that together. But for me, that connection has gone from me connecting back to divine source, and again, like, following that intuition, and again, learning from that chaos, that this is perfect, that this is showing me something else about me, this is showing me a direction to go, this is showing me the traits that I have, that I can use as an advantage to to help myself and then help others. But for me, that connection, even, and to have that connection with other people, and to be able to help people, and to have that connection with my daughter and
Mm.
support and everything. For me, it all starts with coming back to that connection to source,
Mm.
and finding that connection has allowed me to find the connection to myself. And that for me has been the most profound part of the entire journey.
Beautiful. And you can even hear it in your voice. You know, I know I'm looking at you, and when people are listening back to this podcast, they won't see your face, but I can, when you're speaking about it, you can see that you're so connected to yourself when you're speaking about it. It's so strong for you.
Yeah, and it's because, like, for me, it's like a lifetime of misery. Like, I mean, like, I turned 40 this year, and for me, it was like, geez, I've only just been born. Like, it just feels like I've only just started my life, and all that misery and all that darkness and everything. Like I was just miserable my entire life, and my hands up because it's completely down to me that I was miserable. You know, it's all my choices. It's everything. It's how I choose to think and everything. So it was all on me. But just finally, especially in the last maybe 2 to 3 years, is coming to a point of myself and actually just really accepting myself and really accepting where I'm at, like, and actually thinking, you know, just having that connection and understanding that the control, not control is the wrong word, but the power that we actually have to manifest our reality and the life that we actually can have, and just sitting in such a dark place and creating so much more darkness for myself, and just how simple it is, and then to actually have that flip and get that connection back to myself, and just see how my life has changed as well, like, and not even just change on the outside, because to me that doesn't really matter, but to change how I really feel, and to change how I really feel about life. You know, like, go back to my teens, and like I've had suicide attempts, I've had everything because of that darkness and not knowing or not understanding anything about it. You know, and going to a doctor and just, take this, and no explanation, no understanding of what this chaos really is.
Yeah.
Now actually being at a point where, like, it just, like, I don't have enough time to do the things that I feel I can do, like, kind of way, and all positive things and all fantastic things, and just to enjoy life. And yeah, so for me, it really has been just a complete rebirth, of just everything, like, and to be in a place where I just absolutely love life, love living life, and just want to live it more, and just to do and create so many more things, and to resonate that with other people as well, so that they can share in it as well, and they can see, and so it's just been, it's been phenomenal.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can hear the excitement in your voice even with it, and I say that to people, when it spark, starts to flicker inside, and then it starts flaming a little bit more and more and more. You wake up one day and it's like you are reborn into, the world looks completely different because you see it differently, because it always comes from how we see ourselves, how we see the world. It's not that, as I said, when I spoke about me as a teenager and looking out the world would have seemed like a crazy, awful place. That's because in my mind, there was all chaos. So everywhere looked bad, whereas now I see that, if you look at media and everything, you see the world as they want you to see it. But if you're looking from a different place, you can see the love, the connection, the help, that, you can see so much more going on. But people are quite afraid, aren't they, Peter? People are still quite fearful. And one of the things when you spoke about, connecting to divine source, connecting to source, what for you is source? What is your divine source?
For me, it's whatever perception of divinity, of God. And again, I don't talk about religious, because I study enough ancient texts and religious texts and what have you to understand that it's the one God that they all speak about, but it just have some different person try to take their perception of it, and that's what became a written text, we'll say. So if you look at it, they all cross-reference to something similar.
Yeah.
And basically anything teaches us that, okay, we have a connection to something divine, and this is my own belief on this and what I've just kind of lived through my own experience, but we all have a connection to this divinity, this source, this light source, whatever it might be. And in order to get in touch with it, unfortunately, we have to remove a lot of this layers that we have that are not us. Because the spark is there. It's the spark is there. It has been there since we were born, incarnated, or whatever you want to call it. But that spark is there. But we can't. That's why children are a lot more open, because they put on less programs the younger they are. But then as life goes on, as you said, like, we have we have educational program, which is, we're taught in an education system, and then you're educated by everybody that you meet and their opinions and their perceptions. And then you also have like experiential programs, which is anything that happens to you in life is going to block you up to different things. And so then all blocks that spark that we have. But the more we start to peel back these layers of what we're not, we can actually open the communication of that spark a little bit deeper. And for me, what I like to call it is the 3 states of consciousness. So we have super consciousness, which is like divinity. And then we have our subconscious, which is basically stored within, and it's untouched by the conscious reality. And then we have consciousness, which is basically our day-to-day, what we can be affected. So our conscious reality can be affected by the likes of turn on your media, and it's fear, 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 fear. And then the more fear we have, the less we can actually connect to divine source, because all we've seen is the fear, and it's not truth. So for me, it's working on myself, peeling back the layers of what I'm not, and which is basically traumatic experience, or anything I've been programmed to believe in life. It's to take things back, because we don't consider things rationally, and to be right, they'll go with it because it's always been that way. And that then interrupts how we decipher the subconscious language. So the subconscious language is receiving the signal from divinity, super consciousness, and then plays it out to our conscious reality. But if our conscious reality is blocked up with fear, we can't read that signal good. So we're not really getting our intuition properly. We're not really following it properly. And then, for me, it's been, as I said, it's kind of working hand in hand. And again, with the knowledge that I used to study just as a child, which is all to do with like ancient cultures and symbology, I now know that why is because there's something there from before, whatever wisdom that I've carried or that was there that I was tapping into, that now this works with me because the subconscious speaks in symbols. So your dreams, it's symbology, it's ancient symbology. Everything is symbolism. So basically, the more I've cleared off in my conscious reality and doing the work on myself, I'm now able to kind of feed the subconscious information a lot more clearer. It's not blocked as much, or it's not getting tainted as much. And then with the knowledge that I picked up through my life of just what I was interested in studying, I'm able to kind of read the message a lot more clearly, which is basically that message that comes from divinity. And for me, I believe that what comes from divinity guides us to be the best version of ourselves, which is our true self. And once we become our true self, that's us absolutely slotting into to where we're supposed to be. What's going to make us the happiest is by being our true self. Once we become that, it's almost getting close to perfection. As much as we can't be perfect, but if that makes sense. So by doing the work with the healing with myself and removing all those things and those fears, and starting to see the world and myself for a truer version of reality than what I've had, that's allowing me then to tap into subconscious and decipher the message from divinity. And again, it goes in a loop because it's all about bringing me back to my true self.
Lovely. Yeah, Peter. Yeah. Everything you're saying, I have said to many of my classes and people, in talks and everything. You may say it a little bit more eloquently than me. I just say it out in my Sharon Fitzmaurice way. There could be an odd feck and whatever in the middle of it, because I feel quite passionate about the work that I do, and I can see that you do as well. Because I'm looking at people, that are living in fear, and then they come to me and they say, well, I can't get out of this place of fear. And I always say, we just break everything down and we come back to that simple light within ourselves. We start there. And if you can find that light within yourself, you keep seeking it out, and you'll seek it out and it'll seek you out. And then everything will start falling away because you'll only be focusing on that light. And I try and keep it simple, because when you spoke, for me in my worst times, there was a little tiny spark of light. I mean, it was so small, Peter, because I believed the rest of me was just fading away into the dark shadow. And that little bit of light was still there, but I saw it. And I held on really tightly to it. And it got me, as I said to here. And I always feel so grateful and so blessed that I really noticed that light, and I kept continuing to notice it. And I did that through my own inner awareness and meditation. But it took me to places within myself that were very horrible and very dark and I faced lots of truths that were not my truths, but they were truths that I had learned over time. And I had to face my own, as you said, responsibility for your choices in, the choices you made in your life as a teenager or young adult. And I didn't like a lot of them. But every time I faced one of them, the light got stronger.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%.
Mm.
Yeah, and it is. It's just. I mean, that's like as Jung calls it, it's the shadow work, really, isn't it? It's where you have to face these things because they are part of us. I mean, anything that we've done, or anything, or any trait or habit that we have that we're not happy about, it's still part of us. And by looking the opposite direction, it's not going to go anywhere, but it looms and it gets bigger and it gets bigger. And that's why for me, one of the biggest tools is shame. Is anything that I'm ashamed of that I've done or about myself is something I really need to look at. It's something I need to face it full on, because it has power over me unless I can actually look it straight in the eye and accept that it's part of me. So 100%, as you said about that light, the spark, the more of that darkness that I look at and that I accept and fully integrate into myself. And again, that can take a lot of work, as you know yourself, with the shadow work, and it can, you have to open a lot of doors and go down a lot of dark tunnels and face those aspects of ourselves. But once you actually do start to do that, and you start to take those aspects and that you don't like, and you start to really be able to look them in the eye and then accept them, say, okay, that is me, you take their power away, and then they don't loom over anymore. They don't bounce up at the wrong time, and they don't make you react in ways that you're not happy about, because you accept them. That they can't hurt you anymore. They can't cause shame. They can't cause any control over you, because you just accept it. And that's part of me. I can have a conversation with anybody now and tell them about those parts of me that I was totally ashamed of at one stage in my life. And once you do that, as you said, that darkness, that shadow diminishes, and then that light gets stronger. And that spark gets a little bit bigger. And then I've always had this thing about, like, once you take that uncomfortable step, the universe always gives you something back almost straight away. And so for me, it's like, if I do that uncomfortable thing and I face that shadow or that aspect of myself, almost straight away, once I've done that work on a certain aspect, I mean, the work never ends, but once I've done that main body of work, that I've studied into that and faced it, almost immediately some door will open for me, some positive door, or something will come to me that in a reward. And that's that light getting bigger, that's that spark getting bigger. And that's just, and I'm sure you know yourself, once you've kind of felt that for the first time in your life, you're not going to go back. Like, you're just going to keep progressing and keep making that stronger and that light bigger and more positive influx into your life.
I'm smiling because, again, throughout my own journey of learning and, and not even sharing with others, but through my own journey, and one of my friends and myself, we laugh and we say, the deeper we get into the work, sometimes we go, what the heck did we ever start this for? Because it just brings up more and more. And she says, I look at some of my friends and they go out to the pubs. This is when you could, I suppose. They go to the pubs and they drink all weekend. They don't give a shit. They go to work. They're getting on fine with their lives. Why are we doing all this great work and we're feeling like this and having to face this shit? And I said, well, would you rather go and sit in the pub from Friday to Sunday and go to work from 9 to 5? Is that what you want your life to be like? If you do, that's great. But if you're not happy with that side of life, then there's something else to be sought. You have to seek something within yourself. There's something inside of you seeking your attention, seeking knowledge, seeking this. I don't even know what words to put on it, but for me, it always feels like it's something that's coming from within me, from that light source that is trying to present itself to me. And it's for me to pay attention to it.
Yeah, no, definitely 100%. And that is it. Like, I mean, some people maybe they're happy in where their lives are, and that's perfectly fine, of course. Like, and it is, but it is that something. And again, sometimes what can stop a lot of people, I think, is the fact that we get so comfortable in our misery because we get so used to it. It's not that we want to be. Like, I know for myself, it's like, I was so miserable, but yet at the same time, it's that thought of change. Like, yeah, but I don't know about that. Like, yeah, like, obviously I want to improve my life. I'd like to be happier, but at the same time, I'm kind of so used to this darkness. I'm kind of so used to this misery. I know how to live with it. Like, as awful as it is and as awful as it was, but it's, you kind of get to that stage of, you just, I don't want to take that step. That'll be so awkward and that'll be so uncomfortable to be doing that. And even though it will lead you to something better, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that definitely comes from me. Like, it's just that inner calling, as you mentioned, it's just something that's pulling me towards something, because I know there's something better there. I know that there's something bigger there, and I know that there's something more powerful. There's some call in there it's magnetized me.
I think that calling is just being your true self. I used to, and this is just my own, little thought about it. I used to think there was something outside of myself that was drawing me closer and closer to it. And then I realized it was only bringing me back more and more into myself. The more I did, the more I learned, the more I sat, the more I, went inwards. It brought me, it just feels like I'm returning to source within myself, Peter. It's not out here, but I know I'm sharing stuff out, and I'm guiding others and interviewing and chatting with people, but I'm always returning inwards to the source within myself.
Yeah, no, definitely. I could resonate with that anyway, because
Yeah.
it is that kind of call home, isn't it? Like it's just, it's like, as I said, it's like you're peeling off all those layers that have built up. You know that you're underneath it, like, the true you. And it's actually something I was really worried about going back a couple of years back was I thought, Jesus, if I do this work on myself, and what if I'm, what if I lose the bits of myself that I actually like? You know what I mean? Like the few bits I have and all that. Like, but as you said, it's you're coming back to yourself. So it's actually the bits that are truly you and the true self, they actually get stronger, they get brighter. But I remember it was like a fear I did have, is the fact that, like, oh, would I lose like the way I think? Like, even though it goes against me a lot of the time. But it does work for me in so many other ways. But and it is just it's just you becoming more you, like, and it's just
coming home to ourselves. Coming home to ourselves, isn't it? And Peter, it's such an interesting chat, but I really want to talk about your book now, The Phoenix Birth. What a title. That is amazing. I love the title of it. And I came across you on your page on Instagram, Subconsciously Conscious. I love even the name of your Instagram page. And you were reciting one of your poems, The Truth and the Journey. And this poem was about exposing your insecurities and taking away the veils of illusion. Have you got that poem handy that you could recite for our listeners?
So the truth and the journey, yeah. What if I just wrote in pain, ink my quill in blood, feed you half a story, suffocate you by the night? Black night for lunar appreciation, lead diamonds are the stars that twinkle, giving all to the void. None voided with the gasps of appreciated beauty, given up an offering. How full their cups must be from our imprisoned hearts, giving out escapist glory in search of what's within. The divine comedy, rumble laps rolling from the mountains, perceived as thunder, echoing over the heads of most. I smile in appreciation, no quirk unrewarded, yet quick to contain it should it be mistaken. Days of night, loved by fear and consumed in starvation. I could almost appreciate its encrypted creation, were it not for falsity. No veils now exist, only bared pain, transmuted in process or awaiting metamorphosis. The spirit of the medicine, my Beatrice, guided to El Paradiso.
Beautiful, beautiful. Such a powerful poem, the words, but I think maybe when you're reciting it as well, you can feel your pain and passion within it. Yeah. Just so beautiful. Can you tell me, when you were writing this, what was going through your mind?
So again, I mean, I think at this, the time I wrote this, I think I had done a plant medicine retreat at the time, which I found through my own healing, but it's just kind of a lot to do with my own journey. I mean, I have it kind of loosely kind of intertwined with some references to Dante's Divine Comedy. But yeah, so it's all about, I suppose, if I only give a half a story, if I'm not giving bare in my absolutes, what good is it? Because I just feel as a veil of society, which everybody lives in, is social media and the likes, where everybody wants to portray the perfect life. But I'm like, it's not human. It's not us. It's not authentic. It's not truth. So for me, it's just about like that story. But like, if I do only give half the story, if I'm not giving it all, I'm still going to get suffocated by that darkness.
Yeah.
You know, and just like how we give our glory to external beauty, like nature and what have you, rather than giving it to ourselves.
Mm.
You know, and that we get so caught up in the conform of society and the programmings, and you know, taught that we should be this and we should externalize and you should have this car or this house, or you know, or what have you, and that we're the whole time missing ourselves. We're always externally, but missing out what's within. You know, and then I just have it about like the Divine Comedy, about like how it's when you actually sit back and you look at the reality of the world and you look at the truth of the world, that it's quite simple to see the veils that's been pulled over everybody's eyes. And
Mm.
obviously it wasn't done overnight. It's been done for thousands of years, you know, but when you actually look at it, that it's so obvious. But I could almost appreciate how clever the veil that's been pulled over is, but I wouldn't, rather than somebody might mistake me for the fact of being a part of the other side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it just about my whole journey, you know, how having to go through that darkness, you know, but coming to the point of the appreciation of that darkness, because without that darkness I can't be me. I can't
Mm.
find me. I
Mm.
can't grow that spark that's within me, right? You know, and set it alight even further.
Mm.
And just it's what the whole part about that then is just me exposing myself and being completely open, wide open to everything. Again, like we spoke about the shadow self and that
Mm.
all that shame that I might have from different aspects of my life and myself and my habits, and
Mm.
exposing that completely. And that's the metamorphosis. That's the change. You know, that's the butterfly from the chrysalis, basically.
Yeah.
And then I just have the last line, which is about the spirit of the medicine, my Beatrice, which is again, it's a Dante reference, guided to El Paradiso. And again, that was a little slight reference to my own journey with plant medicine, which was a huge catalyst in my own journey as well.
Yeah. Tell me about your journey. Thank you so much for reciting one of your poems. As I said, that one really stuck out for me. And when you were reading it, I thought it was very powerful. So I wrote it down and I said, you know, if Peter does have the time to come on my podcast, it's one I would really like to hear you reciting, and also for the listeners. But tell me about your journey with plant medicine. How did you first discover it, or were you curious? Did you decide you'll try it out and see what happens, or had you kind of read a lot about it beforehand?
Yeah, so I had been kind of looking into it for years, to be honest. And like I've been doing so much kind of like the know thyself work, you know, which is the old work of the mystery schools, which is basically doing so much self-analysis on myself and understanding myself and learning all the bad habits and the bad traits that I had, and kind of putting a lot of logic to it. And I was doing this for a lot of years, but I was still kind of caught like in a lot of, you know, some things I couldn't change the habits. I still had the same habits and everything. So I had been looking and studying about plant medicine for a long time, for a couple of years, and I'd been, you know, kind of mulling it over and you know, will you, won't you? And it seemed like such a radical kind of a thing, to be honest, at the time. And again, that just comes from a program of society. But that, you know, you put it off and I do more research and I look at this and look at that. And I suppose as everything is the universal timing is always perfect, as everything always is. And yeah, so when I came to do a plant medicine retreat, um, and that was the start of it, I suppose, really. And it really, you know, and I started kind of, I suppose that was about 3 years ago, maybe now,
Mm.
um, maybe three and a half years ago, and I just really found it like scratching the surface, but because I'm very kind of caught in my own mind.
Mm.
So for me, like it was a long process really of getting in there, getting into myself, but it really just helped me to actually see a different perspective of myself
Mm.
that it's very hard to explain with the different types of plant medicines and how they work, but I was able to really do a lot of clearance in myself, but by feeling emotionally a lot of
Mm.
things that I hadn't felt,
Mm.
traumatic experiences or whatever, even from being a child, like things that we might as the adult looking back might not be considered to be anything kind of really big, but as a child obviously it would be something that would impact your life. So it really helped me to tap into the emotional side of things, or aspects that happened to me, you know, all sorts of things, and even to close the deaths of friends and what have you that I've had, and to really help me to release
Mm.
a lot of aspects like that. But really the difference is that understanding that you can really get from it, because we can, like I had done so much work on knowing myself and analyzing myself that I could understand a lot of things, but I still couldn't change it. I still couldn't change that habit. But it
Mm.
just happened to give me this different perspective of myself, or it's very hard to explain, but I could just really feel the
Mm.
change within me.
So say in your first experience, of this, is it like a little ceremony you'd go through, and that you take the plant medicine, and what was the feeling, the initial feeling? Did you have a fear? Did you go through a fear process as you started with it, going through the layers?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because I suppose with me is I'm at kind of a stage now where I'm kind of at that stage I was already gone away from drugs anyway.
Mm.
Alcohol was still having difficulty to. I mean, the space of time between each alcohol session was getting a bit longer, but it was still ruling me every time I drink. But yeah, so when I went into it first, I suppose it's going back into that world of loss of control. And plant medicines, I mean, they are sacred. They are sacred. So I mean, these are sacred ceremonies that are done and held. But for me, it was the big fear of the loss of control.
Yeah.
Because, and again, I think that's something that resonates with just about everybody. Is we have this fear of, because we control our life, we think we control our lives. We don't. The more control we try to put on our lives, the more resistance we create. But it's that, okay, I'm going to lose control here. I'm going to lose control of me holding on to everything, and it's that fear of what would come out of me, I suppose. So that was a big part for me, and that took a lot of. That actually took probably a lot of ceremonies before I even got over that.
Really?
Yeah.
The reason I'm interested in that, because I was sexually abused as a child up to the age of 13. So I didn't feel I had any control, obviously, as a child. So as I grew then into my own person and everything, I always used to say to myself, and I remember writing this years ago, even as a child, to my abuser, you will never have power over me. As I grow, you can have power over my body, but you will never have power over my mind, and that I really lived, that's what helped me survive, I suppose, through it. But then as you were talking, that's why I'm asking you, because a lot of stuff on a subconscious level, I know that, I have probably just stored away, forgotten about, never want to hear about it again, even though I have done so much work on myself. And I look back at that time in my life with peace, it's not chaotic for me in my emotional self. But I'm on that, when you're talking about plant medicine, I'm wondering, as you go in, because our mind can fool us and say, I'm fine with it now, it's great, but our body is holding on to the trauma. Our body holds, cellular memory. And on that level, as you were talking about it, I could feel a stirring within me, as if, this is somewhere you need to explore. But and in my resistance to it, it's making me go deeper inside, going, okay, maybe you should try this. So, but that's why I was questioning you about the fear. Did you go through those levels of fear? Where does it bring you? Does it bring you back to the fear of your very younger self, or is it the fear of you now as an adult? What did it feel like for you?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was the fear of me now. It was the fear
Yeah.
of me now losing control.
Mm.
Like what would happen? Like because again, having studied it, like, and looked at it and again, studying these plant medicines, you're better off to just not bother studying.
Yeah.
Because it is something, it doesn't matter. What happens to one person is not going to happen to you. And what happens to you today is not going to happen to you if you do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's like, it is kind of a pointless exercise, but I had done so much of this work anyway.
Yeah.
And it is, I suppose it was just that fear of what would happen. Like, would I lose control? Would all this rage come out of me? Would I explode? Or or just what would happen? And again,
Yeah.
I suppose in that control aspect of life, I always have this thing about like, this self-conscious thing, I suppose I've always had, like, about like, I don't want attention, I don't want eyes on me, or I don't want to be, even in a room, I don't want to be the loud one shouting, or I don't want to be the one puking in the first, this kind of creating a bit of a scene, or
Yes.
or
Yeah.
just any attention to myself. So I think a big part of me was the fear of that, of losing control of that, like of, oh geez, what if I was just being a complete loon and drawing a load of attention to myself, and that's a big, as ridiculous as it might sound, that was initially a big fear of mine.
Yeah.
But it's hard to explain. But the medicine is, it's like, there's different medicines, different types of plant medicine. But like ayahuasca, for example, is like, there's a really, really divine spirit that works within that medicine. It's the easiest way I can describe it. And she basically just gives you what you need. It's not what you want or what you think you want. It's what you need. And
Sounds lovely.
yeah, but I mean, it can be very difficult. But even if it is difficult, she doesn't give you anything that you're not able for. So I mean, like, on that note, like, if it's if it's something that feels that it needs to be brought up in you, it'll just, it's again, a lot of it comes down to trust with the medicines. Once you actually have the trust that the spirit that's in these medicines, once you trust them enough, you trust them to take you wherever they're going to take you. And that's really the real gift in these medicines is trust. And again, that comes down to that surrender. And how do we surrender? Because everybody surrenders in their own way. But for me, that's why for me initially it took so many ceremonies, I think, to get me to a point, because I'd scratched, because that control. So she worked on me with the way my mind needed to see things, because of the way my mind works, and all about that aspect of that self-consciousness of control, about how would I be. So she had to break me down in so many different ways, like not exactly here straight ahead where I wanted to go, but she went in a kind of a peripheral around the way to get me to that central place eventually, because she works very individual to each person. And that's really the magic of that medicine. It's the real beauty of it. Like, so when you do trust it, and you get to a point where you do trust it, you just allow her to take you wherever she takes you, and just trust that it is to work on you, to get you back to your true self, and just to be a better person, and to be cleaner and be clearer.
Lovely. Again, I hear so many similarities when you're speaking. I can hear myself speaking to some of my groups, and only this weekend, the big word was trust. And I'm a Reiki master teacher, and as I was saying, you have to trust the energy is only going to bring up what you're strong enough to be able to heal, or to look at, or to process, because people are worried. They are fearful of, what if it brings up the worst things, and I'm in front of a group of, and I only work with small groups because it's very intimate, and it's very soulful, and it's very human, and it's all our worst things are exposed. So it's never going to be a big group, and like you say, people are worried about what other people will think of them. And that's a human trait. And of course, it's very hard not to go into something without worrying about that. And it does stop you from being true and being honest. So it's always in small groups and very intimate. So everything you've said, I do that already with my own groups. And now I've become almost so trusting in that energy and in that work. But as I said, when you were talking about the plant medicine, I can feel the stirring inside of me to seek it out. And I'm like, damn you, Peter Kelly.
There's just so many ways. And I think, as you mentioned, just when you started the podcast, like there are so many ways to the one goal that we're all looking for, and there is, and we see so many resonances and so many similarities to it. Like, even though one can come from such a very, very different aspect, like for me, like, as I said, I've studied so many ancient texts, and big into like alchemy and philosophy, obviously from the ancients, but like the ancient mystery schools, like the whole initiation process, if you go back far enough before they got tainted by the late Greek times, but if you go back even further, even to the Egyptian, like that whole initiation process was only kept, first of all, for people of a set type, who would have the morals and the codes and the ethics, who would not pass this information or whatever onto people who would use it to control humanity, which is obviously what did happen. But this information was passed. But in order for them to be initiated, it's the exact same process that's done in a different culture with these medicines, which is South American. And if you look into, like, you can look into the Irish culture as well. You can look at the Druidic culture, which is basically the Irish version of the mysteries. But it's in every culture across the world. But this information was given through a process of death and rebirth, which is basically what it is. So you had to break somebody down. You had to break the initiate down so they would de-learn or unlearn everything that they had been programmed with, so that you could actually teach them from brand new again. And it's that whole process, which is it resonates across in so many ways. And you can come to, as I said, like through Reiki and through energy healing. It's another way of doing it. It's absolutely the same process, because you're taking people back to the aspects of themselves that have been shut off, and that they've been programmed and conformed in society not to look at. It's okay, just put that back there. It's fine where it is, but yet it starts to rule people's lives because you haven't dealt with it, and it keeps coming up and what have you. But it is just another way of looking at the same thing, and you look at, again, the initiations of the mystery schools, as I said, which is getting people to a point where you could give them new knowledge, and get them to start life at a very different perspective and in a very truer way. Same with plant medicines, and it's the same with so many other aspects of healing, like in different ways. And what happens is once you kind of take all this information from so many ways, you just kind of find your own way with it, and what works and what tunes with you to give back all this. And it's humanity's knowledge. It's basically,
Yes.
it's what we have learned throughout probably tens and tens of thousands of years, you know, from ancient cultures, and then it comes and it gets a bit more modern, and it's the same story, and it's just given to people because humanity evolves at a certain rate as well. So that information from ancient times needs to be updated a little bit so that the minds of the modern human can take it, and then it goes on to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. So it's you know, it is really the same. It's the same methods. It's just different approaches.
Very good. And as you were talking, and earlier you said, you know, talking about depression, and something came into my head there, you know, when you were talking about like death and rebirth. And I remember, I think it was Michael Harding that said, you know, that when we go through depression, you know, I always say I flowed through depression. I never had it. I flowed through it because I'm flowing through everything in my life. I'm not stuck in anything, because if I believe I'm stuck in it, you know, then it's permanent in some way. And I really believe I'm not now, that I flow through everything. Everything is in motion. But he said when we go through depression, it's basically giving up pretending to be what we want, what other people want us to be, and that we want to just be ourselves. And sometimes we must fall apart. And I wrote this in my first book. I fell apart and I put back together, like you said, the parts of me that I liked, even though they were the parts of some of me from the past, but I brought back the parts of me that I liked. But instead of putting all parts, I brought in new parts, and I left space for new things to grow, you know, and that we can fall apart and we can put ourselves back or rebuild ourselves or be reborn, and to realize that we are so unique, but we're all very connected also, Peter.
Yeah, and definitely. And I mean, I think that's what you find. I think once, like, and again, just go back to the depression side of things. I mean, I would believe that 100% the same thing. I think that depression is just really the true self's way of rejecting all the programming. They say, like, I'm tired of it. I don't want to wear it anymore. You know, it's time for you to be you. You know, and we just like, we can't carry all these things that we're not anymore. And I think for me that's like my present description of the chaos and the darkness of depression. And I think then once you do start to kind of come back to yourself, and as you said, and kind of clear back all these layers and these programs, and once you kind of get more in touch with who we are, that is exactly what comes out, is just that connection that we have to each other. You know, and again, if you look at, like, that's, the world is so disconnected. You know, it's so disconnected from where it's been pushed. And again, my world has changed because the circle of people that I have around me are all very connected people. You know, and I don't stick on the news, I don't stick on the radio, or, you know, I just have no need for it. Like, you know, my world is perfectly fine as it is. And if I do stick it on, I can understand why everybody is so detached. Because you're being told all this, whether it's true or not, you know what I mean? And a lot of it isn't. But at the same time, even if it is, you're just being programmed the negative story the whole time. You've been programmed this and this and this, and you've been programmed to hate this person, this race, this religion, this gender, this, you know, and that's all you are. It's divide and conquer. Like, it's, and that's where people are so detached. But the second you start to come back to yourself, you just realize that you don't even need to be, you know, why do you need to switch on any of these things and feed it? And you just really do start to feel that people are, when people are themselves, people just want to better each other. That's all they want. They just want to progress, make everything, make the world, like, make themselves obviously happier, make their families happier, make their circles happier, making everything. And that circle just starts to resonate further and further, wider, and you know, and it can be global. You know, so the more people can just switch off the fear and come back to themselves, the happier everybody can be. You know, and it does come down to that connection. Because we are all connected. Like, we are all connected. And if you go back to that whole explanation of a divine source, we have a divine source that just sends out a signal constantly. The signal is never stops. But once we can kind of pick it up, that signal goes to everybody. So, you know, another way of looking at it, just a theory, is the fact that we are all aspects of that divine consciousness, just living out a different consciousness. So we are actually connected to the source. We're all connected to the one source. We're all receiving the same signal, just acting out in a different way. So that means that we're connected as well. So the clearer we can actually make that source signal the clearer we connect with each other as well. Because I mean, we all have the ability to be completely emphatic and intuitive and everything, and that's, I mean, empathy is one of the greatest gifts that we have. You know, and that is all about connection to others. It's like it teaches us to be more compassionate, because how are you going to oppress somebody when you can actually feel their oppression, what you would cause them? Like, so you wouldn't do it. You know, and that is connection.
Lovely. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely believe we are all connected. And I always say that if we go in deep enough and connect to our own light, you're connecting to the light of everybody else, of everything in this universe, you know, if we just stop and listen. And I'm a huge one about that, about listening to the silence within, listening to the silence without, you know, and this is where you will gain all the wisdom, you know, that you'll ever need. Of course, I love chatting and I love being curious about other people's lives and how their stories led them to this point. And it has been an absolute pleasure, Peter Kelly, chatting to you and learning about your perspective on life and what brought you here, and your new beautiful book of poetry, The Phoenix Birth, which people can contact you on subconsciously.conscious on Instagram. Is that right?
Yeah, that's it. So most of the stuff that I do at the moment is all of the Instagram page. So yeah, exactly. So at subconsciously.conscious. Yeah, and they can get me from there, and they can message me. My website is still not up. It's a work in progress with about 6 months. That just seems to be never getting done through my lack of time and lack of probably motivation towards it, I think sometimes. But yeah, so the Instagram page is the best place to get.
Brilliant. And when you do have your website, you can just let me know and I will add it onto the podcast anyway. So what is it now that you would like to leave people with, you know, that you would say to a person that is maybe struggling at the moment? Because this podcast is always about, you know, the resilience of the human spirit. So with everything that you have come through in your own life, and you are in this beautiful space right now, but as we know, there's many people that are not, what words of encouragement or support could you give to them, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to reach out to people. Obviously, number one is the main thing. Because I think people are afraid to admit, you know, what they're going through. And again, that comes down to just, you know, people trying to portray a perfect life on social media and what have you. And I think it creates it harder for people to come forward and just to be themselves. But I think it's just really important for people to really be honest about what's going on with them. And there is no stigma if you reach out to genuine people, you know, and, you know, to just, that's just for me is the most important thing, is just to speak up. If you're going through something, if you know, any kind of a bit of a turmoil or chaos or any little bit of a dark spot, because we all do, you know, I still have plenty of dark days. But obviously just there are traits and habits that we can apply for ourselves, and the signs and things that we can look at in ourselves to get guidance on what we need to do to better ourselves or to get over that dark thing. But it is important to reach out, like, you know, and to have somebody to speak to and to say, here, listen, this is going on. And even if it's just a conversation, I think for me, that's the number one important thing always, is just to actually be open about it, not to sit with it. If it's becoming too much, or if it's something, or even you just want a different perspective or a different point of view, talk to somebody, like, you know, reach out to one friend, even if it is, and just to have that conversation. And you'd be surprised what that conversation can do.
Absolutely. Peter Kelly, thank you so much for all your insights. It has been amazing. I look forward to learning more in the weeks and months to come, and all that you're sharing with us, and to see where your poems will go. I read something lovely. I think somebody wrote it, and I have to see, did I write it down? Oh, yes. Somebody wrote, "This is a perfect piece of art, a classic. It should be read 100 years from now." I just thought that was so beautiful, because somebody that listened or read your poems has sent that energy out into the future. And I know now that's definitely going to happen. That's my belief, that from 100 years of now, it might be on a dusty shelf somewhere in the archives, and someone will pick up The Phoenix Birth and go, and maybe they'll be having the exact same conversation as we're having now, Peter.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. So thank you, everyone, for joining us again. And as I said, you can check out Peter Kelly his new book, The Phoenix Birth, and it's at subconsciously.conscious on Instagram. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to chatting with you all soon.
Thanks, Sharon.